1893, something extraordinary appeared on the shores of Lake Michigan. In the city of Chicago, a gleaming white metropolis rose almost out of nowhere. Massive domes, grand columns, long, reflective lagoons. Buildings that looked like they belonged to ancient Rome or imperial Greece. And at night, the entire city glowed with electric light, brighter than anything most people had ever seen before. They called it the White City. For many visitors, it felt like stepping into the future. For others, it felt like stepping into a lost civilization. But here's the part that still fascinates people today. Just a few years later, it was gone. Torn down, burned, in some cases, blown apart with dynamite. So what was the White City? Why was it built? And why was it destroyed? To understand that, we have to go back to the late 19th century. Chicago in the 1890s was a city hungry to prove itself. Just 2 decades earlier, in 1871, the Great Chicago Fire had devastated much of the city. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to ash. But instead of fading, Chicago rebuilt bigger, faster, and more ambitious than ever. When the United States decided to host a grand World's Fair to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas, several major cities competed for the honor. New York wanted it. Washington wanted it. But Chicago fought hard and won. The event was officially called the world's Columbian Exposition. The scale was almost unimaginable. Over 600 acres of land in Jackson Park were transformed. Swamps were drained. Lagoons were carved out. Roads were laid. And at the center of it all stood a coordinated vision led by architect Daniel Burnham. Burnham had a bold idea. Instead of letting different architects design unrelated structures, he wanted harmony, unity. A city that felt intentional and grand. Inspired by classical European architecture, the design embraced symmetry, wide boulevards, monumental facades, and a striking uniform, color white. The buildings looked like marble temples. Vast exhibition halls towered above visitors. Sculptures lined walkways. Water reflected the glowing facades at night. But here's something many people don't realize. Those magnificent structures were not built from solid marble. They were constructed using a material called staff, a mixture of plaster, cement, and jute fiber applied over wooden frames. It was designed to look permanent, but it wasn't. The White City was, in many ways, a theatrical masterpiece, beautiful but temporary. Still, temporary didn't mean insignificant. When the fair opened in May 1893, the world showed up. Over 27 million people visited during its 6-month run, at a time when the entire U.S. population was around 63 million. That number is staggering. And what they saw changed them. The White City was one of the first large-scale demonstrations of alternating current electricity. Thanks to the work of innovators like Nikola Tesla and George Weston, the fair was brilliantly illuminated using power, winning a major victory over Thomas Edison's direct current system in what had been known as the War of Currents. At night, thousands of electric bulbs shimmered across the buildings and reflected in the water. For many visitors, this was their first time seeing electric lighting on such a scale. It must have felt almost supernatural. The fair also introduced the world to new inventions and cultural icons. The first large Ferris wheel rose above the skyline, offering breathtaking views of the grounds. New food products debuted. Technological marvels were displayed. It was a celebration of progress, industry, and modernity. But beyond the spectacle, the White City had a deeper impact. It inspired what would later be called the city. Beautiful movement and urban planning, philosophy that believed beautiful architecture and orderly design could uplift society. The idea was simple. If cities looked inspiring, people would behave in more civic-minded, refined ways. For a moment, the White City made that vision feel possible. Yet, behind the brilliance, there were shadows. The 1893 fair coincided with a severe economic depression known as the Panic of 1893. Banks failed, railroads collapsed, unemployment soared. Outside the fairgrounds, many Americans were struggling, and within Chicago itself, a darker story unfolded, that of H. Holmes, a serial killer who operated a so-called murder castle not far from the fair. While millions celebrated progress and light, horror was unfolding in the same city. The contrast was striking, dazzling white facades and deep human darkness. When the fair closed in October 1893, the question became unavoidable. What happens next? Some visitors hoped the White City would remain permanently. It had become a symbol of national pride. But the reality was far less romantic. The buildings, as magnificent as they looked, were never meant to last. The staff material deteriorated quickly in Chicago's harsh winters. Moisture seeped in. Cracks formed. Maintenance costs would have been enormous. Financially, the Exposition Company was already strained. The country was in economic turmoil. Keeping the entire complex standing simply wasn't practical. So, gradually, the demolition began. Some buildings were dismantled piece by piece. Others were destroyed by fires, whether accidental or not remains debated in some cases. And for larger structures, dynamite was used to bring them down efficiently. By the mid-1890s, most of the White City was gone. Today, Jackson Park still exists. The lagoons remain, and one major structure survived in modified form, the Palace of Fine Arts, now home to the Museum of Science and Industry. Everything else lives only in photographs, drawings, and memory. So why do some people believe there's more to the story? In recent years, online theories have suggested that the White City may not have been temporary at all. Some claim it was evidence of a lost advanced civilization. Others argue that such monumental architecture couldn't possibly have been built so quickly in the 1890s. But historical records tell a clear story. Architectural plans, construction documents, photographs of the wooden frames before plaster was applied, all of it survives. The timeline, while ambitious, was achievable with the massive labor force and industrial capacity of the era. The illusion of permanence was intentional. The goal was grandeur, not longevity. In many ways, that makes the White City even more fascinating. It was a carefully staged dream, a city built to represent hope, power, and progress at the edge of a new century. And, like many dreams, it was never meant to last forever. Its destruction wasn't a secret cover-up. It was the natural end of a temporary vision created for a specific moment in history. But the emotional impact lingered. The White City influenced architecture across America. It shaped civic design for decades. It showed what coordinated urban planning could look like, and it gave millions of people a glimpse of a modern, electrified future. Perhaps that's why its disappearance feels so dramatic. When something so grand vanishes, we instinctively search for hidden motives. We imagine secrets. We wonder if something was taken from us. But sometimes, the truth is simpler and no less powerful. The White City was built to inspire. It did exactly that. And then, like a brilliant firework in the night sky, it faded. All that remains are the photographs of glowing white buildings reflected in still water, and the question that still echoes more than a century later. What does it mean to build something magnificent, knowing it won't last? The White City was built to inspire, and even after more than a century, it still does. If stories like this make you question what we truly know about history, subscribe to Past Front Archive, because sometimes the past isn't gone. It's just waiting to be rediscovered.